Welcome to Holy Health, the podcast where cutting-edge health insights meet timeless biblical wisdom. Join us as we explore the latest in wellness, fitness, and mental health, all while grounding our journey in the spiritual truths and guidance found in the Torah. Whether you're looking to nourish your body, mind, or soul, we'll help you live a life of balance, vitality, and faith. Tune in to discover how to achieve holistic health through the perfect blend of modern science and ancient wisdom. Let's dive into the fullness of life, body, and spirit together. Hey guys, welcome back to the Holy Health Podcast. This week's episode is one of those episodes that I recorded a long time ago, probably about a year ago. And it takes a special person to be willing to come on and talk about today's subject. And I approached many different people about coming on to be our Torah guide for this very, very important subject. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't something that a lot of people necessarily wanted to do. So I'm really excited that my friend Stephanie is going to be talking with us today on the Torah's view on intimacy and marriage. Today's topic is with a lovely couple from TantraNova. And when people first hear TantraNova, they think Tantra, they're thinking about something that has to do with sex. And yes, I'm calling today's topic sexual health, or a form of sexual health. But really what Freddy and Elsbeth are teaching is about having lasting intimacy within your relationships, whatever those relationships are. It could be a relationship within marriage. It could be to do with your business partnerships. It could be intimacy between friends. It could be on many, many different levels. And this wonderful couple has workshops, they've written books, and they teach certification courses as well. And it was a really, really interesting conversation. For me, I felt like this was really important because I feel like very often in Judaism, at least within the religious community, be it the modern Orthodox community, be it the more yeshivish or Haredi community, there are certain subjects that people don't like to talk about. And very often I feel like we sort of almost behave like an ostrich with its head hidden in the sand. Like I know for many, many years, this is probably, I would say for the last 15 to 20 years, this has been a far less taboo subject. But talking about sexual abuse was very taboo, right? Often sexual abusers were hidden by the communities. And, people were told that if it got out that they'd been abused, it was going to be their life that was ruined. And people would actually try to protect the abuser. That was just a really terrible, terrible time, I know, for many, many people who were abused many years ago when they were younger. And today I know, thanks to organizations like Oh Hell, among many other organizations, this is no longer a taboo subject. And abusers are dealt with harshly, and they are given over to the police in most different types of communities. But I feel that there are many things that we still don't like to talk about. And one of those things, I believe, is sex. Now, I'm not saying that that means you have to show or talk about very graphic things with your 3 or 4-year-old. I think there's an appropriate time to speak to children of different ages. I think that there's always an appropriate time to figure out what is right for each age, what is right for you within your family. But I think we do a disservice to people who are brought up in a way where this is a subject that no light is ever shed on. And I think that there are many people within the Orthodox community, and not all within the ultra-Orthodox community, but even within the modern Orthodox community, who go into marriage or go into relationships not really understanding how to behave or what's appropriate behavior. And I do just really believe that this is a very, very important topic to cover. And I guess I would call this the second episode we've had on sexual health. The first episode I did way back at the beginning when I did a 2-part episode, my first 2-part episode on coming out in the Orthodox community. Because again, like so many other things, this was a topic that needed to be dealt with. I myself have at least 5 friends who have a son who has come out as gay. So I think trying to pretend this is something that doesn't exist is not a smart way to handle things. I think that we have to understand what's going on. We have to understand how to deal with our children, whether they're gay, whether they're straight, whatever it is, but understand how and when it is appropriate to speak to them. And I think that Freddie and Elsbeth did a fantastic job in handling all of these different topics. And I think I asked them several questions that were probably asked in a way that maybe they hadn't been asked before, because I was trying to kind of look at a religious perspective on some of these issues as well. And I know that Stephanie really talks a lot about the way Torah views intimacy in marriage. And I think this is an episode you guys will really enjoy. I hope so. Please, as always, feel free to give me feedback. Please feel free to let me know what other topics interest you guys. We have some really good interviews coming up, and I'm looking for new Torah people to come on and help me with the Torah extras as well. And as always, if you're someone who is doing something or working somehow in some capacity that can be related to health and you feel like you'd like to be interviewed, please feel free to reach out to me. All the links are in the show notes. And please follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, all of the different social media channels. I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and I hope that we are getting closer and closer to an end to this war where all of our soldiers, we lost so many soldiers this week, where no more of our soldiers will be hurt or killed, and where the rest of our hostages will come home safely. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Holy Health. I have not one, but two guests with me today. They are partners in life, in crime, and everything they do. I would like to welcome Dr. Elsbeth Meuth and Freddy Zental Weaver. They have assisted more than 10,000 couples and singles in rekindling and expanding their love and relationships over the past 2 decades. They are the founders and directors of the TantraNova Institute in Chicago. They're featured on Showtime's documentary series Sexual Healing and the Emmy Award-winning NBC show Starting Over. They have shared their intimacy secrets at a global YPO, or Young Presidents Organization, conference in the City of Love, Paris, and they've been nominated as Changemaker at the White House-sponsored 2016 United States of Women Summit in Washington, D.C. This engaging couple are sought-after speakers, often online at universities, spiritual centers, conferences, and summits. The efficacy of Elsbeth Meuth and Freddy Zental Weaver's work is captured in the 2009 Doctor of Psychology research thesis, The Impact of Tantra on Couples, Intimacy, and Sexual Experience, by Meredith E. McMahon of the American School of Professional Psychology of Argosy University in Chicago. Elsbeth and Freddy Zental are beloveds, life and business partners, and they reside in Chicago. And I know that they are also the authors of the book, Sexual Enlightenment, How to Create Lasting Fulfillment in Life, Love, and Intimacy. And I'm very excited to welcome them both here today. Long overdue on the Holy Health podcast for a conversation about sexual health. Like, it's really long overdue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that relates to all of us, because unless there's some test tube babies out there, we all came into this world through the act of sex. And we're here to share with you what we've been doing for the last 23 years at our institute all over the world with couples and singles, and on how to, really harness this altered state of consciousness that happens in the sexual, and really learn to listen to that place as a way to flatten a lot of the story that we have that keeps us from what we most deeply desire. And that's what we've been doing. That's kind of our, you said, partners in crime, our weapons of mass transformation.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let me ask you guys first, how did you meet? Elsbeth, we hear your accent. You clearly, I don't think you were born in America. How'd you guys meet? How'd you guys get to where you are?
Okay.
You start.
I'll start then. Yeah. So we met 23 years ago online. We're one of the original early online couples, Dating couples, right.
Gives me hope.
Yeah, right. So I was in the software business for a long time in San Francisco. I had been introduced to these practices when I was 13 years old, living in Hawaii, going through my puberty, spending a lot of time in the shower. Father at the time was a practicing psychiatrist, and took pity on me and gave me a book to read on how to integrate sex and meditation. I loved it. My girlfriend loved it. But more than that, I had this idea, this dream, this hope, desire to go on to college on athletic scholarship, but didn't believe that I could do it living in Hawaii at the time and get the training and exposure and so on. Well, I did go on to college on athletic scholarship. I did all the things that you would normally do to do that, but it was with ease, grace, and flow. So I kept doing these practices in my personal life and going to workshops and reading books. And, I was in the software business for like 10 years in San Francisco, and it just had become just a job. And what I knew about my own engagement in life, something was missing. So an opportunity to open in Chicago. So I took it. They moved me here. And I was single online looking for a Shakti, a female Tantra partner. And Elsbeth's profile showed up and we met. And, 6 months to the day we met, I what we call transcended the romantic drama, and we created this work.
That's great. That's really great. And so how did you get up to that point where you went online to meet Freddy? How'd you get here?
When I hit 50, I really hit also a place of despair. At the time, I was a management consultant. I had come to the United States in my late 20s to do postgraduate work in music, went on to get my doctorate in education, and then I moved into management consulting. Because in the 90s, I had gotten quite good at consulting, yet was despaired in intimate relationship. I had this pattern of attracting unavailable men. And while that was exciting, most of the time I was alone. And there came a point when I could see the trajectory that if I was not going to change that pattern of attracting unavailability, I would, end up without lasting intimacy and love in my life before I was going to leave this planet. And I just didn't want to settle for that. That was the time when I decided to delve deeply into the practice of Tantra, which is an Indian and East Indian tradition. I knew about Tantra, but I had never, dedicated myself to the discipline. I mean, not just reading a book here or there, but really immersing myself. And what opened up for me, because I went with a question into this tantric work, the question, what's in the way for me that keeps me from bringing a beloved into my life who wants to be with me totally, fully, wholly, to use your word of the podcast, Holy Health. So, and what opened up for me through the tantric healing and practice was that I had held distrust towards men. Dara, I had no clue about that because I was very charming. I was inviting the guys, reeling them in. I didn't run around like a distrusting bitch. However, there was something underneath in the subconscious that was not visible to my conscious mind that was running the show. But when it's in the subconscious, we don't really have control over it. And through the tantric practice, given that we tap into our physical self, our energetic self, our cellular self, our emotional self, mental, spiritual self, in a nonlinear way, you are being guided towards it through the practice, through the also sexual practice that opens up new vistas, new places, including places that may have been obscured, that, however, impact your life in a way that you don't get what you want. And that was a huge opening. So the distrust really got altered into deeper trust in myself and then deeper trust in men in general. And then 6 months later, Freddy came into my life.
Ta-da!
And yes, I did have my profile on a Tantra site at that time. A couple of sentences, not even my picture. And Freddy came to me, and within a couple of emails, he said to me, by the way, I grew up in a tantric household. I said, what? I didn't even know that this existed. I had on my list of wants that this partner I want to bring into my life was either very interested in learning Tantra or already practicing, that there could be a man who had been studying this and practicing since he was a teenager. I mean, it was like, wow, universe, or God, or the divine, you gave me much more than I ever could even think of. So the moral of the story is keep believing in that it's possible what you want. And
let the miracles show up.
yes.
I like it. That is an incredible story. And I'm going to ask you a question. And if it makes you uncomfortable and you want me to cut it, I totally can. I'm not great at math. I'm not very good at math. But you said you were 50 and you said you met 23 years ago. Are you going to tell me you're 73 years old?
I'm turning 75 next month.
I'm like in shock. And any of you, because most people don't watch on YouTube, you all need to go to YouTube. You look 60, maybe 50, late 50s. Like, so I don't know if the Tantra does something for your skin and the way you look, but like, I just had to put that out there because I'm not great at math, but I can do simple math. So, wow. Okay.
I'm 68. I'm 68.
Okay. That's like not even normal either. I just thought maybe, she's 75. Like, I don't know, maybe we're like 20 years younger than her or something. Okay.
No,
that is like, okay. That is okay. Fine. So you should all go check this out on YouTube because these two look fantastic. So we're going to learn a lot more, but it's definitely keeping them young because they look fantastic. Okay.
Oh,
So we got that. Well, we got that out of the way. So let me ask you guys, I've heard of Tantra. I've heard of Tantra yoga. You guys go by TantraNova, I think is the name of your, right? What is
yes.
Tantra? Can you first explain what that is and maybe the difference between these things?
Yeah. So Tantra is an age-old practice in working with the sexual as a way to connect to the spiritual aspects of our beingness, the frequency, the emotional self. And so we are TantraNova, Tantra New, so Tantra initially was the yoga of the energetic body as opposed to Hatha yoga of the physical form. And so we're Tantra New, and we're integrating aspects of age-old Eastern Tantra and newer approaches to transformation from the West, like generative language, how we create our reality in language, creative self-discovery, how we discover ourselves in the creative process in music and movement and art. And we've created a gestalt of all of those things, working with specific and teaching specific ritual practices for people to do to tap into the altered state of what happens when we're in our sexual energy. So just to say a little bit more about that, forever we've been creating life, right? Procreating, it creates life. For the last 100 or so years or more, recreating with the development of contraceptives. And so what we're teaching is how to co-create with this sexual energetic expression of energy, because energy is one, as we know, science will tell you, and the manifestations of it in our physical form as humans, we can be angry, we can be sad, we can be disappointed, but when it manifests as sexual energy, it's unique in that it's creative, it creates life, and it's pleasurable when we're in it. So when you add the distinctions that we teach in terms of breath awareness, energy awareness, and intention, like I want to create a beloved or a work that's fulfilling or a place that's inspiring, whatever it might be, coming from that there's nobody out there but ourselves as the authors of our lives, then there's something we're not seeing that keeps giving us what we're getting that we don't know. And so in that altered state of the sexual, again, altered state being that we're more open, loving, vulnerable, receptive in that when we're in our sexual aliveness, chemically we're changed, more endorphin, serotonin, oxytocin, the feel-good hormones. So it's in that intimate vulnerability, that altered state, that we can get more connected to what we don't see, running in the subconscious belief, energetically, emotionally, and story. Coming from that we're all looking into the world from this clay that we are in terms of all the things we've experienced from life. And then we get to a point at some point in our life where we want to create something different, something new. And so there are a lot of approaches to transformation. There's therapy, there's nature walks, there's meditation retreats,
Plant
medicine, exactly. But none that I know of teach how to work with the sexual as an altered state. And I, as I mentioned earlier, was introduced to this practice as a solo practice as a very young person, and it served me my whole life.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to ask you a question that, again, so in Judaism, for men, they are not supposed to ejaculate outside of, let's say, marriage, because outside of having a partner, I mean, I don't know, a lot of the old kings had a lot of concubines also, but outside of the actual sexual relationship. So I'm just wondering how you, because I also know that I heard you on someone else's show talking about how you teach this work to like priests and things like that as well. Now, I don't know a lot about priests. I know they can't get married. I don't know if that means they're not allowed to masturbate. Like, I have no idea. So I'm just throwing that out there as a question to you guys. You know, does it have to come to that, or can you use these practices without actually ejaculating outside of a sexual relationship?
You want to take it, Elsbeth?
Yeah. So this is really great that you bring this up. This question around ejaculation, that even in many cultures, probably most cultures, it is that like without ejaculation, there's no completion. However, every ejaculation is a tremendous loss of life force energy for the man. This is why they want to go to sleep or zone out or watch TV. There's a disconnect. If they are with a partner, there is a disconnect with a partner. It's a biological thing. The energy is gone, So in the tantric practice, also the same is true for the Taoist practice, which comes from China. They are dedicated to a similar premise, which is all about for the men to learn to forego ejaculation so that this energy can stay available in his body. He learns to move it up into his heart through the breath, into his third eye, can circulate it within himself, and of course with the partner. Now, a man needs to learn how to use his pelvic floor muscles because there is a reflex that sets off the ejaculation. It's a reflex just like when I hit my knee. It just kicks in around 9.5, 9.75 when
ejaculatory reflex.
Yeah, on a scale from 1 to 10. And a man can learn to master the reflex, which means that the ejaculation doesn't leave him, which means the energy stays within him, which is very precious energy. And he needs to learn how to move energy, both subtle energy as well as aroused energy. Energy can only move with the breath, and he learns how to move that energy up from his lingam, which is the Sanskrit term for penis, or directly translated, actually magic wand or wand of light.
Much more endearing than dickhead. Right? I want to add something to this too. So for the man, in that learning to separate ejaculation from orgasm, because a lot of guys hear about Tantra and they think, oh, good, I'll be able to last longer and learn a few new tricks and it'll be a deeper experience. And that's all true. Yet instead of lasting longer, we talk about circulating consciously this, what we call orgasmic nectar. And that's another level of playing in that ether, that magical place, the 3 seconds of orgasm that the French call the little death, can last for 45 minutes or longer. And it's in that ethereal place that we can start to get encumbered by the story, the clay that we live and believe. And that's where they call it sex magic. We don't like to call it that necessarily, because really it's getting out of our own way, beginning to recognize the stories and beliefs energetically, emotionally. And people already come to us. They've done a lot of therapy. They already have an intellectual understanding. It's how to shift it energetically.
Yeah, and back to your question,
yeah,
Sarah, that this is, these are fundamentals for the tantric practitioner to learn to channel their sexual energy, because this is life force energy. Life force energy and sexual energy, they are the same. They are not separate energies. They just show up at different gradations. So right now, we got a little bit more engaged here just in the last couple of minutes. However, the energy is still, we could call it, in a subtle state. I suppose nobody is aroused at this moment.
Well, speak for yourself.
Yeah. So, however, when I then in the summer walk by Lake Michigan, which is like an ocean and it's wonderful, and the breeze touches my skin, I'm not highly aroused, but the energy has risen a little bit more than when I sit at my desk and do some teacher stuff, you know? And then, of course, all the way up to that climax, to that ejaculation, it's the same energy, yet at different gradations. And we can learn to play that energy, that rising and falling of that energy, just like we may learn how to play a flute. So I can bring myself up to a 5 and stay at a 5, which is not high arousal, or go up to an 8, or even a 3, and I can breathe through that. So it leads us to play with this energy for not only the release. The release is just, it's a short-lived thing for both men and women. And not that we don't at all, shouldn't enjoy that at certain moments. However, there's so much more to that life or sexual creative energy that we then can channel and use to embellish our physical health and well-being. You alluded to our age earlier. Yeah, if I learn to master my energy and channel it so it really imbues me, again, my physical well-being, my emotional self. Imagine channeling this life-giving energy that is joyous and pleasurable and creative in nature, touching my heart center, which then can open my heart further and enliven this love energy that is so, infinite in all of us, but sometimes dormant or hidden. Then I can bring it to my mental awareness, for my thinking. And then, of course, connecting with my original, also my original self, my spiritual self. For me, that's the same, actually, the original and the spiritual self, that then connects me to the godliness, connects me to the higher self, but also to the higher of everything, of everyone. You're so eager to jump in.
I know, because you hear me say that, and I want to add to it, but keep going. Please go ahead, babe.
So this is, for Jewish men who follow that doctrine, they then can cultivate their sexual energy, forego ejaculation, both for themselves, and it is superb when a man can master his ejaculatory reflex, because what happens then, Dara, is when he connects his sex with his heart, he becomes more available in the heart. Most men, when they want to connect sexually, they start feeling it or want to connect, period. They start feeling it in their sexual center. Most women, when they want to connect, they start feeling it in their heart center. Now, this is not just for heterosexual couples, so it's the same for same gender couples or transgender couples or bisexual couples, because it's about polarity of the feminine, masculine, or yin and yang. If that polarity is not there, there's no magnetism between the two people. So the one who is in their masculine energy more, to breathe up that desire from the sex into the heart. When I feel Freddy's heart opening, my heart opens. And guess what? When my heart opens, my sexual center opens. That's called yoni. Yoni means sacred space in Sanskrit. And I find it much more endearing sacred space than vagina or even sexual. Yeah, I mean, a sacred space is a space I honor, I cherish, I appreciate, I deal very well with. So then we have a circuit, just as I can circulate the energy through me up into my higher being and back down again, where my higher being communicates with my sexual self and my sexual self communicates with my spiritual self. That then gets further expanded So that cycle or circuit that a couple can then move in and enjoy and
Yeah, and for
love.
men, one of the things for this is that we start to become conscious of how unconscious we are around the sexual piece of ourselves. Because for guys, there's two emotions that are socially okay. That's having sex or fighting, right? And so when one starts to learn the separation of ejaculation from orgasm, we have to bring consciousness now to this automatic way that oftentimes a woman feels like it's just lust. It's just for your own selfishness that you're feeling that. But it's in that place for men that we can feel unencumbered by the restraints of our emotional selves. We feel connected, we feel loving, we feel vulnerable. And so when men start to learn to separate the ejaculation from orgasm, they start to open up to that in other areas of their life as a way of listening and being. Yeah. And so when you bring consciousness to the sexual, the kernel of that energy, creativity, and pleasure starts showing up in areas of life that seem completely unrelated to sex in the simple process of living.
First of all, it's fascinating. And as you were talking, Elsbeth, it made me realize that my microphone just fell. But before that, it made me realize that that's why they tell athletes, right, the night before the big game, not to have sex, right? Or a boxer or whoever. And it just made so much sense why they tell them not to, because I guess they're getting it from this, tantric teachings or something.
What
Because
what
it's
they
like,
know, excuse me, but what they know is that when we have orgasm, we lose our energy, as Elsbeth was saying. But if they said, the coach should have said, you can have sex, but don't ejaculate, circulate.
Oh, interesting, right? Then you probably would be even more,
You'd
that's
be even
really
more
interesting.
creative and engaged.
Yeah, because, Tara, it's not about restricting the energy.
Right.
It's not foregoing the energy. Yes, foregoing the ejaculation, but not the energy. And then when a man can breathe it up into his heart, into his third eye, that is then available. And many men that come back from that practice, either if they do the solo practice as homework in Freddy's men's workshop that he teaches, or when we work with couples, and they come back from, there's a very particular ritual for the men where the man is the receiver and the woman is the giver, supporting him in his channeling of his energy. Then when they come back, they say often, for one thing, I didn't know that I could do this. The second thing is, I never have experienced that kind of feeling and sensing the connection. Another thing they often say is that I never felt as intimately connected with my wife or my partner. And so new dimensions also get opened up. And in some sense, it's miraculous. And in another sense, it's a very practical thing.
So you talked about, breathing it up into your heart center and then bringing it up to your third eye. Obviously, that's probably something you learn to do within your workshops, but can you just expound on that a little bit, what you mean by that a little bit?
Yeah. So what we are talking about is tapping into, like, you can't really feel your blood running. It's running unless you're working out and then you feel your arteries expanding and your heart beating faster. So it's sort of developing a capacity to be more self-reflective. So I can lead your audience in a 30-second practice right now. Okay, so seated up comfortably. If you're sitting up, legs uncrossed, eyes can be open, closed, or soft focus. Beautiful. So now I want you to bring your awareness to your breath. Put a hand on your belly. And I want you to bring your awareness to your breath, following consciously your breath into your nose, down your trachea, lungs extending into your diaphragm and belly like a big balloon into your hand. Really extend into your hand with your belly. And then when you're full, feel the belly, consciously flatten it towards the spine, following your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Continue to breathe that way. As thoughts come, let them go. Don't engage. Bring your focus, keep your focus on following your breath into your nose, down your trachea, lungs extending into your diaphragm and belly like a big balloon on your inhalation. Following your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Continue to breathe that way. I'm going to speak and we'll just go a few more minutes or seconds. You are your own witness to any thoughts, conversations, interpretations, or meaning. For these few moments, you're just breathing and being, letting the thoughts come, letting the thoughts go. Feeling the rise of your belly on your inhalation, flattening of your belly on your exhalation through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Stay with it just a little longer.
And while you're breathing in and out, enjoying communing with yourself, take a moment and notice how you're feeling right now, how your body is feeling. Notice any sensations in your body or the absence of sensations. Now notice your emotional state, the state of your emotions. And notice your state of mind, your state of thought. And then remove your hand and slowly come back by opening your eyes. And Dara, if you could be so kind and share a little bit how you may feel right now.
Okay, first of all, I feel amazing. Second of all, I have to tell you guys that's because I'm a physical therapist. I don't know if I told you guys that in the beginning.
We read
And
that.
the thing that I teach every single person is how to diaphragmatically breathe. It's the first thing I teach because you will have back pain. So I'm about to ask you guys if you guys have any pain. You could have back pain, neck pain, you can have stomach issues, you will have heartburn, you can have pelvic floor problems, you can have pain in multiple areas of the body or two sides of the body when you do not have a functioning intrinsic stabilizing system. And that all starts with the way you breathe. So to me, like, I love this because when you breathe diaphragmatically, you tap into the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, and you calm your body down. So I loved every second of it because I do spend some time breathing every day, but so to me, that was amazing. And the fact that this work is so connected to breath work, to me, is what makes it sound like it's so incredible because I know that breathing, to the detriment. My kids laugh sometimes when they're like, oh, just tell this one to breathe and it'll, because I think that breathing solves a lot of problems.
Yes, absolutely. And so that, to answer your question earlier, is how you learn to move the orgasmic nectar up to your heart, your third eye, and so on. We can even use that same practice of focusing in with your attention on a sensation or location and your intention to move it in a direction with your breath. So you put your attention on, say, the sexual aliveness and the pleasurable feeling, your attention, and then your intention with the breath to move it up to your heart. And you start to be able to do that very clearly and viscerally in a short period of time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Wow,
and you know, the energy cannot move without the breath. When we don't breathe, we die. You know, it's rather obvious. And doing the diaphragmatic breathing by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the feel-good hormones get activated. And so then what we just did in the practice, we could feel that when we bring our awareness to the breath moving down into the belly, no, the air doesn't move there, but the intentionality with the movement is then brings it all the way down. And then when we breathe out, it just travels back up and out of the nostrils. So the energy goes hand in hand with the breath. Actually, in Sanskrit, there's a term which is prana. If you study yoga, you may be familiar with that, whoever is listening today here. And they are not separable. So while we don't generate life force energy, it's given to us at the time of conception and leaves us when we leave this planet, we can affect the flow of energy through the conscious breath and the focused mind. And that is how we can move subtle energy, just as we did it in that breathing practice. That is how we can move aroused energy. That is how we can move emotional energy, embellish love, joy, and bliss energy, or, let go, release anger, hate, jealousy, and so forth. And we can intervene with our busy mind, because thoughts are frequency, pure frequency. We cannot touch them. We cannot see them. However, when I focus my mind and I breathe consciously, I cannot have all these thoughts going at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean that some of them come in again, yet however quickly I can change with bringing my focus to the breath, they actually disappear. And there is a level of presence available that, of course, is not only around self-love or lovemaking with the beloved, where we want to bring that to, but also in the way I am with a client, or, like even speaking with you on this podcast here. So it's really applicable to any place in our life.
First of all, that's amazing. And I want to tell you guys something, because you might find this really interesting. And that's why I was smiling and nodding. So in Hebrew, we know when two words have the same root, because Hebrew works around root words. That means that the words are very connected. So the word in Hebrew for breath is nishima, and the word in Hebrew for your soul is nishama. Right? So your breath and your soul are very, very connected. So when a baby is born and he takes his first nishima, his first breath, his nishama, or his soul, comes into his body. And exactly what you said, when you take your last breath, when someone takes their last breath, their soul leaves their body. So
Yes.
I just thought you guys would like that.
It's
Oh, that's
beautiful.
beautiful. I probably, if you're reading the Torah or the Bhagavad Gita or the, any of the spiritual books, the Bible, whatever it might be, they're all talking about this stuff somewhere, because, this is the human stuff that we are, and the pundits have been studying it and writing about it, and the spiritual masters forever. And so how can we, though, create peace on earth?
Right, exactly.
These practices are really beginning to see ourselves in each other, and what science is saying now in terms of the quantum approach, quantum mechanics and the unified field. And I know when I'm connected with myself, I can more easily, listen to another, make requests, listen to requests. So it's easy to get these concepts intellectually, yet how do we embody them? And so what we're sharing is really not so how to transform something intellectually, but how to transform it energetically. So that practice of breathing and being a witness of ourselves and our story making, that then creates a cascading effect of the thought, beginning to separate that, to have a senior commitment of I want to create a beloved or whatever it might be, to sort of flatten the old story that, creates the belief, that creates the feeling, that creates the results, to then keep moving with grace, ease, and flow towards that thing we most deeply desire, will create at the end having had a fulfilled, authentic life.
Boy, okay, I love everything. I love everything you just said. That was beautiful. And I want to actually go back to something you said in the beginning. You said you grew up in a tantric household. You said you're 68 years old, which means we're talking about you had very enlightened parents, because this was like, okay, I'm not that great at math. So 68, you must have been born in the early 50s. I'm going to say mid 50s, something like that.
1956, yeah.
Right. So you clearly had very enlightened parents. So what age should somebody begin this practice?
Well, I think it's particularly with the sexual awareness practice, as soon as someone gets into puberty, because they're already curious, they're already experimenting. So like for myself, when I was 13, I was already masturbating in the shower. I was to kind of make a joke of that, but that's what was happening. And so then to learn that, I can actually apply breath to this practice, and I can actually apply playing with the edge of the ejaculatory reflex, and I could also apply bringing my awareness to the intentions of what I want to create in my life. And I could have that as a foundational listening when the antithesis of that starts to show up in my life. Oh, I won't be a basketball. I can't, da, 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 da. And I see that story, and I can flatten and let go and get some distance from that story and keep moving. That is really powerful for young people to get. We had a youth program for a while. We canceled it, but I think that these practices and this kind of awareness, as I mentioned, as you heard on other podcasts, where We don't work directly with priests or nuns necessarily or spiritual people, but they can learn this if they were vowed to celibacy as a way to be what this energy leads us to.
Right. Right. No, I mean, it's fascinating because, like you said, you use this work to help you get your athletic scholarship and bring it to other places. And I like that idea because even within, Judaism with married couples, there's 2 weeks a month where the couples can't be together. So, obviously after when the woman has her period and for about 2 weeks after, until she immerses in the mikveh, they actually can't be together. So it sounds like this is almost a good time to be working on some of these things where they can't really touch each other and they can't, you know what I mean? But to actually use this to get to this higher level of consciousness,
Be conscious of the sexual self. Absolutely. Because they're just
know,
starting, not be unconscious about it or be, shamed by it or just kind of good luck with it or told not to, pay any attention to this energy that's just so alive, particularly at young ages.
Right. Okay. So that's really fascinating. And okay, this is a little out of left field, but mental health is such a big deal today. Now, I know what breathing can do for mental health, but is this type of work, like, have you worked with people at all, that are having issues of mental health? Because let's face it, that's like every other person pretty much in the world today.
Yeah, so let's broaden that term mental health because it can be, do you have to go into an institution or do you live your everyday life? And, with some inflictions, and who doesn't have some inflictions, at least at some moment in one's life? Or, many people pacify themselves with alcohol or drugs or, by not facing what may be there. And everyone has to do what they find is right for them. So I want to speak to that if we are open to tapping deeper into ourselves, where there may be folds that may not feel so comfortable, wrinkles. And because the opportunity by going towards these wrinkles that are uncomfortable, there is the possibility of clearing them and freeing ourselves. Because whenever there is a constriction in, any kind of mental, health concerns have to do with constriction, just like physical health. When I'm sick, be it a cold or a headache, or I have an inflammation in an organ, there is an energetic constriction. It's also part of the protection of the body, so the survival, just with emotions, when it feels so sad and hopeless that I don't know what else to do, I may just close off so that I don't have to feel it. Then there's a constriction. Now, constriction is part of the dynamic of life. Energy constricts and expands. It never stays the same. However, if I stay in the constriction for, a period of time, it's like becoming calcified, where I cannot feel anymore. But when I cannot feel, I'm not fully alive anymore. There is no passion. Passion implies that we are open to our feelings, the great ones and not the not so great ones. It's the whole dynamic again. And I had moments in my life when I was at the verge of not wanting to be here anymore, and it's not that this wouldn't or shouldn't show up. It's more importantly, it's how are we moving with it? Can we see this as an opportunity to see something, to learn something? Of course, with the right support. We don't have to go through this by ourselves because at times we just cannot see. And then having someone who is experienced and who we trust can then assist us. So in terms of our work, of course, some people come, for example, with sexual trauma,
Many people.
And yeah, and that may be a big thing, that they were sexually violated when they were infants, children, or adolescents. Or in my case, I was not physically, sexually abused in any way, but there was an energy around the sexual that was vilified. And I was very alive in my sexual energy now, going back in my conscious adult life, exploring further where my hopelessness at certain moments may have come from, and delving into it and seeing that there was a sense of not being acknowledged, appreciated as a woman, particularly when I hit puberty and it became more obvious, that being interested in all matters of the sexual, that there was a vilification. I remember when I came home one day and, my father had learned that I had sex with my boyfriend and he called me a whore. It's not available to him to say, "Oh, darling, how can I support you?" And how was it? Or, it was not available to him. I can see this now. However, back then, it was this deep wound, like what I made of it is that, like, men are not there for you when I need them for me. That is the decision I made when I was 18 years old and the boyfriend left, and the relationship, that was like a huge breakdown, not only break up, also breakdown for me. And that is where I closed off my heart, not consciously,
Right.
but it was not safe. It was not safe in the presence of my dad. It was not safe with men if they can just leave you, having opened up a space that is so tender and so vulnerable. And of course, I have more wisdom now, which I didn't have back then. So, yes, it is one way. Actually, yeah, also women mostly, but there are also some men who come with sexual trauma. And they often have done prior work in therapy, which we appreciate because they already have gone towards this whole experience. And when they come to us, is that they get to clear that impact that the early experience may have made on them, clear it also from their physical and energetic body. Because it's not just an understanding, it is really then a clearing, because memory lives in the body. And so it can be quite powerful. And many women and men say that, now I feel really free. I no longer feel like I was a victim. Not, denying what happened,
Right.
being free of that, from which they can live a fulfilled life.
First of all, thank you for sharing your story, because I'm sure it's not always easy to relive that. And I think that it's helpful for people. And I think that you're right. I feel like in life, people go through things that are really bad sometimes. And it's all about, how do you move beyond it, right? Instead of staying stuck within it, how do you move beyond it? Like, how do you take that bad situation and use it to help propel you forward into something new or something better? So, it sounds like, thankfully, you were able to do that. You found the right partner for sure. And, that's really incredible. And I can understand how you guys have helped so many people. And I think that that is wonderful. Thank you so much. And I have one question before I ask my final question, because I don't want to keep you guys all day, though I could talk to you all day because this is really interesting. And again, this is just more combining a lot of the things that I've learned about health. Do you find that work maybe goes better with people who eat a better diet or exercise? I mean, you both look like you exercise. You both look like the picture of health. You look like you probably eat healthy. Do you think any of that matters within the work? Does that make sense, or is that kind of a...
No, absolutely. It does support aliveness and presence and, good health. So I think as we get that we are expressions of this inner self, and this body is like our, vessel, then we can start to take care of it. But when I feel like I am my body and that's all that I am, and it doesn't really matter, and I'm unconscious and I'm drinking all the time and smoking cigarettes and eating bad food, and then I get sick, and then I just go to the doctor and they give me medication and I feel better. So we're totally giving up our power. So yeah, it helps when people are aware of that. And, people can be great eaters and really healthy and physical and come to us and be as just unconscious around creating what they most deeply desire as someone who doesn't have any of that going for them.
And often it may be also the access to looking at one's life and see, where do I truly love myself? Like,
Right.
how do I express this? And by raising the consciousness around our love self, our heart self, our sexual creative self, then when shifts occur in that inner awareness, in that the sensing, the feeling, it's like people become aware and awake.
They wake up.
And if they show up at our doorstep, there is a desire.
Yeah.
There is a wish to alter something, to
Yes.
open up to something that was never there before. And so then, but we are not health counselors. We are not, nutritionists. We are not physical therapists. Freddy is a certified massage worker, and body worker, but it's more like by raising the awareness through the practices, and then people may ask, what do you do to keep slim, or what, questions may come up, but it's not like, we also don't have the expectation. It's like they discover themselves. And ultimately, Dara, it's all about love, because the sexual creative energy is the fuel for love. It's not just about bang, 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 thank you, ma'am. It's one first level of using that energy for.
But there's an intelligence there.
There is so much more, and tapping into that. If that energy brings forth life, wow, what potency is there? And what about learning to channel, to use that potency to inflame my heart, to enlighten my mind, and to connect to source.
Beautiful.
Well, first of all, that really is beautiful. Thank you so much. It did bring up one other teeny question. Again, I might be going off but I like to explore possibilities, right? So
Love your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you ever had people or someone come to you, or a couple that maybe had been experiencing years of infertility, but through doing this work? Because I'm just curious, because I feel like maybe occasionally, not always, sometimes infertility can come from stress and like this learning to breathe when you learn to relax and you learn to open up. So I'm just curious if like that's ever happened.
Yes. We've had many couples, two that I can think of right off the top of my head, who were going through the whole intro vitro thing for years. And it's really a lot of work and a lot of money. And they were just at the last end, and they come to us, and then it all takes, and they create a child.
Yeah. And it often has something to do with the woman, when she relaxes into her womb and, and becomes the vessel, energetically speaking. But it's not like you cannot just tell someone. It's not a doingness, it's a beingness. And through the practices she is led towards, which also means that our yoni, the sacred space of a woman, opens up further to receive. And also the discovery, if there is something that may interfere from the past, that is in the subconscious. And it's for her to be this to be discovered, and the practices, the guidance leads her there. And often in the process, when the man becomes more conscious about himself, he then interacts with her differently. But it's not so much a doingness. It's a connection. It's a sensing. It's a listening, and
Very good.
yeah, it's a little magical.
And it's no, it sounds amazing. And just the way you described everything, it made me think like of the possibilities and that sounded like something that could really be possible, especially for someone who they've tried everything, So that's really interesting.
And Dara, it's this like, particularly in this kind of situation where everything becomes like a task. We need to copulate at the right moment, the right day, the
Right temperature.
everything. And then if I feel like it or not, also the hormones and the injections. And there is a lot of like, the tension the stress. And by tapping into her body and letting go, and in the feminine way, opening up, which calls for trust, not trusting only herself, trusting her partner, yet trusting also the universe, that the fertilizing will come at the very right time. And you can imagine that this doesn't happen in just one sessions or one workshop.
Oh, sure.
It's a little,
Transformation can happen just like that. You don't need to sit on a bed of nails on the mountaintop for 30 years. It can happen like boom, and suddenly you see, and it's like, things shift. But I really do believe that we are a part of everything that is. I mean, I think Einstein said, if you study nature, you'll learn everything. And if we think of that, we've learned to use computers to transmit. We can use telephones, and that we don't believe that we have the capacity to telekinesis or telepathic, and all those things will start to develop more and more as we start to see that it's possible because we're a part of all of this. So one of the things is, again, coming back to war. How can we just stop war, in the world? And it's everywhere in the world, that's the big thing. So these practices are really about creating peace on earth. When we started our work, I told Elsbeth that. Elsbeth said, well, don't say that to anybody because, people, because they're thinking orgasm, and they're like, peace on earth. I just want a better orgasm,
No, believe me, it's something we would all like to see here. That is for sure,
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So
it'll happen. It's all happening.
Please, God. Yeah, please,
Yes.
God.
So, Tara, we have a gift for the audience.
Oh, you like gifts. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you could put the link in the show notes, I will read it to you. And so the gift is an introduction to sexual meditation, where people can learn how to use their breath, how to become more aware of energy in their body, and learn how to move subtle energy, which is the foundation. Unless we can move subtle energy in awareness, we cannot move aroused energy, because aroused energy kicks in, and then we do follow the habits that we have learned for the last 20, 30, 40, 50, however old we are, years, because it's built into our nervous system. So if we want to shift that, we need to alter the nervous system. And so this video class, Introduction to Sexual Meditation, teaches the fundamentals that underlie sexual meditation. And we speak more about the feminine sexual energy, masculine sexual energy, the differences, and how they can be, how we can learn to work with them, that they really can beautifully dance together instead of the differences being, in adversity. And then, of course, our people can also learn more on our website, TantraNova.com, TantraNova.
That was cute. And I'm going to link everything for sure as well.
Right.
Great. Thank you so much.
No, sure. And let me ask you, do you guys have like Instagram or any of those type of social media platforms?
Yes, Instagram, Facebook.
Perfect. I'm going to look you up on Instagram in a minute. Okay, perfect. So that you already got to my last question, but let me ask you my pre-last question, which is about spirituality and what is spirit. I mean, I almost don't have to ask because so much of the way you guys speak, you can just see the spirituality together with everything you're talking about. But let me ask you each to define, how you see spirituality or what it means to you.
Hmm. Well, I don't assign myself to any particular religious dogma. I think it's all good, whatever one believes, it keeps them feeling good. Great. Um, so spirituality for me is being in the moment, being with what is happening right now, being present to my breath, aware of what my thoughts are creating and what my thoughts are, loving other beings on the planet. And it's a practice of every moment by moment. How am I masticating my food? How am I? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? It's all so spirituality. That I don't know. That's the best I can say right now. It's just a part of everything that is for me.
That's great. Absolutely, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what about you, Elsbeth?
For me, spirituality is connected to our higher being. And what I mean by higher being, it's the consciousness that we are all part of. We are the consciousness, and we are part of the entirety of consciousness that's, of course, infinite. Just like, the drop of water in the ocean. The drop of water is made up of the ocean, the same quality, everything, ingredients. I see myself as human being like the drop of water in the ocean of consciousness. And consciousness, then, in that sense, is for me godliness, it's the divine, it's the cosmic. I have different words for it, but it lives more in a sense of being part of the whole.
I
Well, I
want
love
to
that.
add to
Sure,
that
with pleasure.
just real quickly because you spark. We are a spark of that divine. And it
Yes,
is
we
in
are.
every each and one of us to begin to actualize that, how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, seeing ourselves in each other. That's the spiritual awakening that's happening. It is happening because just look how we treat the planet, how we're starting to wake up on that. I mean, there's so many areas, and then the sexual piece is another piece, but
Now, the sexual piece actually is at the core.
at the core.
At the
That's at
core,
the core.
because
Yeah.
we when we call it sexual and spiritual, we also could call it earthly and heavenly. We could call it primal and cosmic.
Yes.
They are together. We are both all the time, as long as we are on this planet. When I leave this planet, I hold myself as like, that the soul being continues in terms of frequency, not in terms of density of a physical body.
Wow. Well, I loved everything you both had to say. That was beautiful. It was special. Like I said, it can be personal, and I love to hear everybody's take on spirituality because everybody is spiritual somehow, and it just fits so well into the work that you guys are doing. I know the effect you've had on so many people, and I can't wait for people to hear this. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dar, for your platform and having us on. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your gracious guiding of us in the conversation.
Very sweet.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Holy Health. I'm really excited. We've got a new guest today, first time on the podcast for an episode that I have been waiting such a long time to put out. My guest today is a friend, Stephanie Osborne. Stephanie is a speech pathologist and she is a Kala teacher. So she teaches new brides before their weddings. And I thought with a sensitive topic like this, she really would be a great person to give us a little bit of insight on what the Torah has to say about intimacy and marriage. I know the Torah has a lot to say. I'm sure many people out there may be surprised, but Stephanie, I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. So what did you think? You have some initial thoughts?
So I agreed with most of what they had to say. I have a lot to add from a Torah, halachic, spiritual perspective, but I do agree that fundamentally, the secret to a long-lasting marriage is having a deeper connection.
I think that's spot on as well.
All right. So if you don't mind, I'll just jump in.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So I want to start with a fundamental truth, which is that Judaism does not see sex as shameful. Although many people do believe that sex is shameful, especially because of our upbringing, it is actually a fundamental aspect of Judaism, that sex is a spiritual, holy, celebrated aspect of our lives. So, first of all, we had to kind of reframe our entire way of thinking since many of us were brought up to equate tznius or modesty with sex and intimacy. And that kind of creates a lot of negative associations with sex that are very harmful. So, for example, girls, for the most part, in many Jewish circles, are taught things like don't tempt men, don't show your body, don't be seen, stay quiet, things like that. And these messages can really penetrate in a really harmful manner when it comes to creating healthy sexual relationships. And in reality, tzniut is actually not about sex at all. And if there is any connection between tzniut and sex, it's that tznius is not meant to be about suppression the way that it's currently taught in most circles. It is actually about respect and dignity. It's about recognizing our bodies, our sexualities, our relationships with our bodies. And if there was any way to connect tznius with sexuality, it would be that our relationships, our sexuality, those things are precious. And because they're precious, they should be respected. And Judaism's intent with modesty and with sexuality is not to suppress desire. It's actually to elevate it. Modesty is meant to create the space necessary for intimacy because intimacy is supposed to be private, not because we're being prudish, but because it's so special and because it's so spiritual that it's not something that we want shared amongst our peers, amongst our acquaintances. It's something special between man and wife, or wife and husband. And when taught well, tznius actually encourages people, any gender, to take responsibility for their sexuality by not repressing it, but by channeling it with intention. So asking, where does intimacy belong? How do we protect it from being diminished or objectified? How do we keep it personal, meaningful, and rooted in love? And so in this sense, modesty isn't actually about what we hide, but it's about what we cherish. And Judaism in general cherishes sex and intimacy.
Can I ask you it might be a personal thought question versus a reality. So where do you think they're getting it wrong in our schools? Where do you think they're going wrong, and why is sex viewed in exactly what you're saying, And again, maybe it could be the different sectors of society are viewing it differently and teaching things differently. But I'm just wondering if you have an opinion on where you think we're getting it wrong and maybe what you would do to change some of this.
Right. So I think that in most schools and in most religious circles, modesty and tznius is taught in a frame of reference related to looks and appearance, what one is wearing. Whereas in reality, it should probably be taught more from the frame of reference of attitude, behavior, character, midot. A person can look very tznius. They can look very modest. They can have every part of their body covered, and they can be awful people, rude, obnoxious, and that's not tznius. A person who is truly tznius, truly modest, is someone whose insides match their outsides, so to speak. So they're kind, they're patient, they're nice, they're sweet, they care about others, they love others, they're helpful, they go out of their way to be available when people need them. And I think that somewhere along the way, we've really lost the true concept or the underlying concept of tznius, and we've made it about outward appearances versus inward appearances. And what you really want when teaching tznius is not to emphasize the physicality of it, the shallow appearance of it, but to really emphasize and teach that tznius is not looks. It's a behavior. It's a way of life. It's a mentality. It's an ideology. You can wear spaghetti straps and still be tznius because it's about how you're acting and not about what you're wearing.
I think there's a lot of rabbis that would disagree with you, but that will lead us down another discussion that's for a different topic and not today. So I'll bring you back. I apologize that I interrupted you. And okay.
Okay. So one of the first mitzvot in the Torah, in Sefer Bereshit, is quite literally be fruitful and multiply. Basically, go have sex, have children. And this is just the beginning of the points in the Torah that emphasize the importance within Judaism of intimacy and how good intimacy is viewed within the confines of Judaism. It's also important to note, though, that the Torah emphasizes specifically the fact that intimacy is about more than sex and more than procreation, that it's also about connection and the emotional bond and the joy and the pleasure. So the Torah's word for sex is actually also found in Bereshit, and it's yeda. And it's seen also in Bereshit when Adam and Chava had sex for the first time. And it says that Adam knew Chava, and then they had, she conceived and she was pregnant. So the use of that term, yeda, or knowledge, it's very important and it's very indicative that sex is not just a physical act from the Jewish perspective. It's about mutual vulnerability. It's about deep understanding. It's a union between the body and the soul. Again, it's not just the physical. You have to know the person in order for sex to be fulfilling, truly, truly fulfilling on like the most basic level. And then later on in Bereshit, we find the verse that says, first one must cleave to his wife, and then they will become one flesh. Now, Rambam interprets this to say that there can be no true oneness of the flesh without first experiencing a cleaving together of the heart. In other words, true intimacy is built from emotional closeness and not just the physical contact, meaning it's built from this deeper emotional connection, not just from the physical act of having sex. And further, the importance of sex and intimacy is discussed throughout various Jewish texts, not just in the Torah. For example, in the Ketubah, which is the marriage contract, it actually states that a husband is obligated to pleasure his wife. This is known as the mitzvah of Ona. And the Talmud goes so far as to say that a man who consistently fails to pleasure his wife, the wife then has the right to demand a divorce. And then even more than that, the Talmud praises men who prioritize their wives' pleasure over their own and states that these men are worthy of special brachot. This whole mitzvah, this concept of Ona, some people view it as sexist. Some people wonder why there's such an emphasis on the female pleasure versus the male pleasure. So to my way of thinking, the mitzvah is an acknowledgement of a woman's power, that a woman has the right to pleasure and to sexual fulfillment. And it's not a one-sided obligation, despite how it's presented in many cases. Men are also obviously well within their rights to have sexual fulfillment and sexual pleasure. This mitzvah of Ona, it's about care and mutual fulfillment. And the emphasis on female pleasure is distinct in that, first of all, it's different from any other religion or culture. Most other religions and culture, they completely ignore women's pleasure. They don't care about women's pleasure at all. It's all about, sex is about conception. Sex is about being hidden. Sex is taboo. So female pleasure kind of falls by the wayside. Whereas in Judaism, we have this extra emphasis on women's pleasure, typically because from a purely physical perspective or an emotional perspective, it is typically harder for women to reach sexual pleasure, to reach the point of pleasure, than it is for men.
That's what I was going to say. That's why they don't focus on the man, because it's just not that hard for men.
Right. So the other question, though, is that why it's not just a question of why we focus or why we emphasize this pleasure specifically for women. It's because intimacy is not just functional; it is spiritual. The goal of sex is not necessarily physical satisfaction, although that is the intent, and we do want that. And the goal of sex is also actually not to conceive a child, which is, again, what many people think. But the goal of sex is actually a form of connection. And in order to truly have that the full potential of your connection, you need to be connecting not just on the physical level, but on an emotional level, on a spiritual level. Sex is not an act. It's an experience. It's a way to renew emotions, to reconnect both physically and emotionally and spiritually. And it's also a representation kind of in a roundabout way of your marriage itself or of the marriage itself. So like I said, Judaism does not just talk about the act of sex. It talks about the emotional groundwork needed to sustain it. If people were just to have sex when they were angry, when they were upset, when they were sad, when they were exhausted, when they felt that their partner didn't care, wasn't really there, wasn't supporting them, then the sex really would not be so fulfilling. And in many cultures, that's what really winds up happening. And then you see things like high incidences of cheating, of high incidences of using pornography as a crutch for masturbation, and things of that nature that aren't necessarily in line with Judaism. And in order to prevent those kinds of things from happening, Judaism has kind of like installed various halachot or guidelines for married couples to use to A, keep their marriage fresh from a sexual perspective, but B, to ensure that there is time for them to take a step back from the physical aspect of their relationship and really focus on the emotional aspect, on their connection, on supporting one another in ways that are completely non-physical. And that all falls under the umbrella of Taharat HaMishpacha, or family purity. Essentially, in a nutshell, when a woman gets her period and then for a short time afterwards, the man and the woman separate. This happens in multitude of ways depending on everyone's culture and what they've chosen for themselves within their marriage. Some people take that to mean that they quite literally sleep in different beds. Other people just take that to mean as they sleep in the same bed, but they refrain from having sex or any form of physical contact, including cuddling, hugging, kissing, holding hands, things of that nature. Some people hear of the rules and the guidelines related to Taharat Mishpacha, and they find them to be very restrictive. And while in a sense they are very restrictive, and they can be very, very challenging and difficult to keep, they present this profound opportunity for a couple to really hone in and focus on the ways in which they can connect on a deeper emotional and spiritual level. They give couples an opportunity to learn how to support each other without physical touch, which is very important. And it's not something that is learned or taught in other cultures. It's not something that's focused on. Everyone says, oh, you see your wife crying, of course you're going to give her a hug. But what happens when that hug doesn't work? There's this concept of the love languages, for example. Not everyone's love language is physical touch, which means that just because somebody is sad doesn't mean a hug is going to work. But everyone's code too, when they see someone crying, is, oh, I'm going to give you a hug. That's going to make you feel better. The amazing thing about Torah Mishpacha is that we are kind of forced to learn that just because I'm crying, or there's a woman crying, or there's a man crying, it doesn't mean a hug makes everything better. And there are alternative approaches to make things better that are actually sometimes even better than a hug, which is not to say that in all instances a hug would be forbidden during the time that a woman is on her period or immediately afterwards, called the nida period. There are certain circumstances in which a hug is allowed and sometimes even encouraged. But it does, like I said, it gives you this opportunity to just focus on how to use your words, how to communicate, how to express yourself, how to plan activities and dates that are romantic without being sexual. And just really focus on your emotional and spiritual relationship over the sexual relationship. And then when you reconnect, when you're no longer on your period, when you come back to the marriage bed and you reconnect and you have sex again, the sex there's like a different feel to it that first night usually. It feels almost, for some, it can feel like elevated. Because you went through this whole period of time where it wasn't just that you weren't having sex, you were also maybe not touching at all. And then all of a sudden, now you get to touch, you get to hug, you get to kiss, you get to hold hands, you get to cuddle, you get to have sex. And the feeling is just, it's incredible. And it gives this new kind of freshness to your sex life, to your physical intimacy, that you wouldn't have if you didn't have that break in between. Just constant.
Yeah, I think that, anything that people have access to all the time, anything that you do all the time, anything, it doesn't matter what it is, it becomes anything that you do all the time becomes by rote. It becomes automatic. It really doesn't matter if it's sex or if we're talking about anything. Anything that you do consistently all the time becomes automatic.
Right.
So when something becomes automatic, especially in that capacity, you're going to probably lose something in it.
Yep. And like I said, the whole concept of Torah Mishpacha, which, by the way, I despised when I first got married. I found it very, very hard. It's actually part of why I became a college teacher.
That's what I was thinking.
Because I felt so defeated by the mitzvah and my inability to necessarily keep it in the way that my college teacher had taught me, that I basically felt like a failure, and I couldn't figure out why it was so challenging for me during the times that I was nida not to be able to hug my husband or to hold his hand or to sit on the couch together and snuggle while we watched a movie. And I couldn't understand why other couples really respected it and loved that period of time where they had to separate. So I started doing a lot of research on it and then discovered this whole kind of beautiful backstory of why we do what we do and how incredible it is. And not that I'm lovey-dovey about it, and I still have my moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate this. But I do definitely respect it and understand it a whole lot more. And I became a kallah teacher so that I can help other kalot through this when they experience all these challenges, but also to teach it in a way that emphasizes that it is not all lovey-dovey, that it is not all fun and games, because I found that a lot of college teachers who are teaching, they really focus on the amazingness of this mitzvah and the phenomenal aspects of separating. And while there certainly are phenomenal aspects, as we've just discussed, there are also some drawbacks and some very challenging aspects that are not always addressed. And I felt that it was important that I kind of try to do my part in addressing those things and helping kalot overcome those challenges to the best of their abilities.
Well, I love that you did that because you did exactly what you should do, meaning rather than just saying this is ridiculous, this is awful, you said, no, I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to learn about it. Kind of exactly what I'm trying to get people to do, with this podcast is learn about things. Don't just take everything, at first, whatever, you have a problem, you're being shoved the medication. I'm not saying don't take the medication, but I'm saying maybe learn about things so that knowledge is power and you can maybe better understand where it's coming from. So I love that you did that and that now you're passing that on to other people because I'm sure, again, that you're a wonderful college teacher because you are coming from a very different perspective, I would say, than a lot of the other teachers. So that's really great.
Thank you. I love it. It's my favorite of all my jobs, actually.
I know she does have a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
So anything else that came along with this? I mean, not that this wasn't great. This was fantastic.
So really just, I guess, to sum it all up, it's that the underlying thoughts about sex and intimacy in Judaism is that sexual expression is an act of love, trust, and spiritual wholeness. And that Judaism at its best literally is giving us tools to build deeper and more honest connections and relationships with both ourselves and each other. And then I'll just finish off with one quote from someone who I very much admired and looked up to, and who I use a lot of quotes from, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who said, "Love is the most powerful force for good in the world. And in Jewish tradition, that force lives not only in the soul, but also in the body."
He's great. He was the best.
He was.
Well, thank you so much for that. I really, really appreciate it. This was great. I've been wanting to put this episode out for so long, and you did an excellent job. I really appreciate, what you had to teach us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and all of its guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Yakir Abelow for editing this podcast.